Hello there guys, it's Joey and this video is a request. So it was asked of me how I would suggest that one connects with each of the four major elements. So I'm going to be sticking with the four elements. I am aware of spirit as an element, so please don't put comments down below saying that spirit is an element. I know, but I was requested for the earth, air, fire and water, so that's what we're going to be sticking to for the time being. We may mention little bits and pieces about spirit as we go along, and because this is me, we're going to do it the way that I would talk to somebody about the four elements. So the first thing I'm going to stress is that I'm going to talk about the frequent and traditional ways that you see elements represented, and then we're going to talk about some different ways of representing the four elements. But the thing that I really want to stress right from the get-go is that how you connect with and interact with the four elements, earth, air, fire and water, is entirely up to you, and it's sort of on you, your personal responsibility to do so as well. So, for the sake of having something in shot, we will put the four tools in shot that are most frequently given in association with the four elements. So, let's do it that way around. I don't want to damage my wand. Please stand up. I know it's an awkward angle. No, I don't want to talk to you. There we go. Right. When you read your initial books, many of them take on the perspective of talking about the tools. And the tools tend to be associated with the four elements, and although there is some sort of debate as whether wand and athame are sort of interchanged between air and fire, and it tends to be which hemisphere you're in versus which way you learnt it. One of those two factors means which one you associate it with. It also has a referencing in tarot, which is one of those things. Because for me, the wand was always presented as air and the athame sword was always presented as fire, and in tarot that's reversed. So that's something we're going to actually touch on later, which is the tarot cards, and I've just realised they're not down here next to me, so I'm going to grab them. 1 second. Okay, apologies. So this is one of these things that you learn as a beginner, particularly from books and from many other sources as well that are frequently available. There are cynical explanations as to why these are given, that it's to do with, the selling of magical items, and then there are the sort of arguments about you don't need particular tools to connect with anything, never mind the four elements, and technically speaking, no, you don't need anything to connect to the four elements in this case. But I think it can really assist beginners to have a physical item which to associate with each of the elements. So we're going to be showing quite a few different physical ideas of what you can associate with the four elements. So I really wanted to start with the tools. It tends to be from as far as I can tell, a Wiccan based school of thought, the four tools, although you will find the four tools referenced in a lot of witch books that proclaim, witchcraft. And the tools do merit a lot of debate and discussion. You'll have people who said, oh well, there's all this fancy nonsense about tools these days, and back in the day witches used whatever was available to them, and all the rest of it. So this is how I'm going to approach the use of tools within magical workings, within connecting to the 4 elements. If you want them, if you think that would be a useful tool within your practice, if it's something you're excited about and you feel drawn to, go for it. And that's it, as far as I'm concerned. When I first started, I was one of those people that did like grab all the different witchy bits because I was so freaking excited. And I, as a newbie, and we're talking some time ago now, so goodness knows what it's like now, came up against this horrible backlash because I was so keen. That was a bad thing, and having the tools was a bad thing, and oh, how could you, and meh. So, do the tools, from my perspective, help you to connect to the 4 elements? I would say, for me, they're not the be-all and end-all of connecting to the energies of the 4 elements. It can be good to have symbolism on your altar, if you decide to have an altar. But what if you don't have a permanent altar? What if you can't have one for all the many reasons? These sorts of things are a bit bulky. They can be quite expensive. I mean, it really does depend on where you're getting them from, whether you can make your own, whether you have funds available, all the rest of it, as to what you have access to. Now, for me, the pentacle in shot and the chalice in shot are 2 recent gifts. I have 2 bigger pentacles, which are working pentacles. They're much bigger. Yeah, they're right over there. I'm not going all the way over there. They're also a bit of a mess. They're more chopping board size, if that makes sense. They do look a little bit like chopping boards as well, thinking about it. But they have a really great purpose within the use of herb craft, so like putting herbs on and imbuing herbs and connecting with the element of earth with that. So the pentacle is probably the one that I would say works really, really well, because it gives you a grounding foundational space on which to work with things. Although technically speaking, you don't have to just work with the element of earth on there, especially given that many herbs and things have different correspondences, as we're going to look at in a bit. From my perspective, I friggin' adore my wand, and I've had that since the very early days of me collecting bits and pieces. It has been with me throughout everything, and it has never left me. I lost 90% of my witchy stuff through personal circumstances and tragedy and all the rest of it. The wand has stayed with me throughout everything. I'm not going to say it has more of a connection to air than anything else that I've ever used. Air was one of those elements which in the very beginning I struggled with. The wand didn't really connect me to the element of air particularly. It is Rowan, which is not the element of air. It's the element of fire. I'm going to double check that I'm not freaking out because it's first thing in the morning. Can you tell? Yeah. It's alright, my information's good, my brain's working. And because of that, it perhaps did not give me the firmest basis in the element of air that I would have liked. I enjoy Athames and Blades very much because of my warrior path, or my Morrigan path. It's going to be another video soon. And they do connect me to a very strong warrior element, but given the reversal in tarot, it's one of those really weird things. Most of the books I read always said Athame Fire, and it made a lot of sense to me when I first started, because the the Athame is more warlike, it's more of a weapon, it's more aggressive and fiery, if you like. Whereas your wand, you know, you can imagine I don't want to say swish and flick because that's just Harry Potter, but swish and flick. And you can imagine it having a lighter air element. But then you get into tarot and it's the reverse. So there's that. And cup is something I've never really had. I lost my cup quite early on, and then I've never replaced it until I was gifted one. So in terms of tools, again, I'm going to stress, it's entirely up to you whether you engage with tools in this manner for connecting to the 4 elements. However, it is not the be-all and end-all of connecting to the elements. So another way you can do this is actually have more literal physical representations of the 4 elements. So, a feather for air, a candle for fire, water for water, and then if you've got some earth for earth, then that would be preferable, but seeing as I don't have any earth upstairs, because I'm a bit funny with things like that. I only take what I need from the garden as I need it, so I don't have any stored up here. So there's a crystal for earth, and that's an earth-based crystal, and we're going to talk about crystals in a minute. Anyway, so the difference with these things is they are cheaper for the most part. You can access most of them within nature. Candles not so much, but they are more discreet. So if you are starting your path and you're connecting with the 4 elements and you need things that can be put away or more easily, or if someone finds them it's not such a big deal, like, oh, it's just a feather, you know, I thought it was pretty, and you can, you know, return the earth to the earth after you've used it. And candles are just, you know, candles, and a bottle of water is a bottle of water. These are slightly easier to connect to the 4 elements as far as I'm concerned, because they are for the most part, from nature, and therefore are more physically connected to each element. It's almost closer to the natural state of being of the element. From my perspective, obviously, again, it depends how you work. If in the beginning you're having trouble, it might be better to work with a literal representation of the 4 elements than a more symbolic one. Again, this depends on the sort of person you are. If you work better in the state of your mind with with a symbolic representation and a psychological link to each element, and that's going to help you connect to those energies, then that's the path that you need to follow. If, however, you in the beginning and you're very confused and you're not quite sure how to get there, I would take one of these sorts of items. You can meditate and journal with these items. Meditation and journaling are 2 elements which I would highly ascribe to any connection to the elements or energy at all. So in your journaling, which would be the first thing you would do, you would write down all of the associations and beliefs and thoughts and images and memories and anything that came to mind about the element. So you would take the element earth and you would be like, okay, how do I envisage the element earth? What connects me to the earth? Is it the ground? Is it sand? Is it my feet on the earth? Is it trees? Is it plants? Which things make me feel earthy? Are there certain types of food that make me feel grounded and earthy? Am I interested in particular forms of magic associated with particular forms of element, and which in my mind connect? So for ease of purpose, I would say the first thing you're going for an earth is likely grounding or wealth. abundance, fertility, that sort of thing. But for ease of purpose, let's say grounding, because that's literally putting your roots down into the earth and grounding yourself, so you don't wander off into the astral. You don't lose sight of feeling connected to the earth, and you're not all loose-minded, and your thoughts are straying everywhere, and you can't concentrate, and you can't focus, and maybe you're getting ill all the time. So grounding is a really strong energy of the earth that a lot of people have heard about, whether they know about witchcraft or not, because of the highly popularized methods of meditation. So once you've started journaling down all things like that, you might then present an image in your mind. Well, this is how I work, so this is how I would suggest going forward, of what the element of earth looked like to you. If it were me, I'd probably say Ent, as in Lord of the Rings, Ent, tree spirit. However, you can envisage how the element of earth would look to you as a person, as a plant person, as an animal person, as an animal. We'll talk about that as well in a minute. And you build an image in your mind, and you can write it down in your journal as well, and then you meditate with it. And what you're actually doing is you're seeking out with your energy a physical representation of what the element looks like to you that you can communicate with. So it's creating a messenger in how you connect to something. And it's a personal experience. And you find this in books quite often when they talk about calling the watchtowers. So calling the watchtowers in witch books or Wicca books is when you call the 4 elements to guard your circle. Your circle is a magical place. I feel like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tahiti, it's a magical place. Right, anyway. That you create as part of your ritual or magical working with energy. There's been a lot of discussion and debate as to whether or not circles are necessary. However, it's something I would suggest that anybody try and explore and see how you feel about it. For me, it's about creating a personal space, a sacred space, a sacred grove in which to commune with deity. It has protective elements, of course, but for me it's more about creating a circle of respect. However, when you first start reading all these books and things, they talk about the 4 watchtowers, and you're calling down the watchtowers of each element. And if you've seen the movie The Craft, then you'll have heard of this as well. I call upon the watchtowers of Mother and Earth and right. So when I first started doing this, I was like, this doesn't work for me, and it didn't. It didn't connect to me. I didn't like this idea of towers or anything like that. And what I started doing without being told or taught is calling on them as trees. At the time, I was on a pagan forum, and I sort of could ask people if, is this okay, sort of thing. And I sort of wrote down what I was doing, and a lot of people were like, oh my god, that's amazing, I'm going to just start doing that. And these are like older people than me, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to listen to myself. And that is the lesson that people really have to grasp, that you have to really listen to yourself. And if that's the best way of doing something, then that's the best way of doing something. So if I call the quarters or whatever, trees are the way I go, and it literally fits better into my path anyway now, because I'm on a Celtic path, the Ogham speak to me, trees speak to me, and it's one of the ways in which I connect to the elements. Okay, so we're going to move these out for now. So that's physical representations. And you can commune with physical representations as well by physically engaging with them, putting your feet in the earth, some water, that sort of thing. See where you get, journal, write it down, that sort of thing. So we talked about tarot and animals, and I think we'll just go with that first. I've got other bits and pieces to talk about. Right, so depending on whether or not you have access to tarot, depending on whether or not you connect with tarot, you may or may not wish to engage in a symbolic journey with the four elements. This is the Wild Unknown Tarot. So there are 3 tarot sets which I currently work with, and that seems to always be the case. I only have 3 that really speak to me right now, which is the Wild Unknown, Prisma Visions and the Marielle. Wild Unknown has this wonderful non-human element to it. There are no humans within the Wild Unknown, and each one of the 4 suits is divided into an element. Let's grab my stick. Right, so you have Father of Wands, and Wands is fire within the tarot setting, which is a little bit confusing if you do start with the tools, but there you go. Father of Cups, which is cups, water. Father of Swords, which is air, and Father of Pentacles, which is earth. Each of these cards obviously has a corresponding animal. Snickety snake, swan, owl, and stag, deer for the rest of the suit. And I'm not going to go into huge depths of detail about tarot because we could literally be here for 3 hours talking about it. But the Wild Unknown means that you have a really good point of reference in which to engage with the energies of each element from a symbolic perspective, and you can visualize the animal and you can think about why each animal is connected with each element. So we'll do snake because that's the easiest, I guess, for fire. For me, I'm a fire crazy person. I don't know. I love the element fire, and you start to really think about it on a symbolic level. So you're closing your eyes and like, right, so lots of snakes. The immediate thing that comes to mind is hot climates and sand dunes, and slithering over this hot sand, and they keep moving because they don't want to hurt themselves, and the sort of shedding of the skin and the movement, and you know, they can be quite aggressive, particularly king cobras. And you get that energy off the card, at least I do. I mean, I immediately see it, I immediately feel warm, I can immediately connect to the energy of the element fire that way. Whereas then if I then switch, and I quite often click to stop things, if I switch to the cups, so then you've got the swan along the lake and the swimming and the pad of the webbed feet underneath, and the water all around them, and it's cooler, and then you also have elements of sort of ballet and the swirling movements as well, things in that nature. And I can do it. Let's do it for all of them. And then you can do Father of Swords, who have owl at night in the tree, up in the air, and they glide and they fly silently, and it's very much of a swoop and a sort of, I'm sort of moving about with my hands, right? So it's a graceful uplifting of wind and torrents and flying and moving about with the energies of air. And then you have the Father of Pentacles, which is a stag in the forest with his antlers, and you can imagine him surrounded by trees, and there's all the ivy growing up the trees and the clipping of his hooves on the earthy ground beneath him, and shrubs and flowers and creatures and earth. So that's how it works for me. I really love tarot as a form of connecting to the energies of the four elements, but again, I'm going to stress how you connect to the four elements is entirely up to you. So what if you have one element that you prefer more than all the others? Can you connect to the 4 elements through a particular energy? Well, yes, you can. And this is one of the ways in which you can do it. So I mentioned already that I love fire magic, and I do. And I think candle magic is my favourite form of magic, whether it be creating them, whether it be using them. I love it. I think there's a level of simplicity involved, but there's also a complexity as you get into it. So it really can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. And sometimes if you need something quick, sharp, burst, you can do that. But then also if you want something more long term. Anyway, that's going off down the garden path. But if you are preferring a particular element and you know this innately, like, oh, I really do prefer fire magic, or I really do prefer a particular kind of magic, how do I incorporate this into my visualization of the 4 elements? Well, colour magic is a really good way of doing this. Colour is a universal, or almost universal, connection. And it's also very highly personal, because how we see colour can differ from how other people see colour. So it's also a connection on a very personal level to a very sort of grand universal idea, which sort of mixes the element of simplicity with the complex. Generally speaking, from correspondences, again, generally speaking, if it doesn't work for you, then switch it up. Yellow is air, red is fire, green is earth, purple is spirit, and blue is water. You can have one of each of these candles in your space. You can draw on a candle, you know, carve into a candle with a pin or a particular tool. Now there are symbols for each. The triangles, you will see them about. You can carve the symbol in, you can write the element on a candle, you can anoint it with a particular oil, you can anoint it with a particular oil and a herb. We're going to talk a little bit about herbs in a minute. And then you light it in honour of the element, and you call to the element, and you honour that element, and you try and connect with that energy. Again, it's going through a meditative process like we talked about earlier, like in visualising how you see each particular element, how you feel about it, the energy that comes to you, the visualisation that comes to your mind, aka the image that you see behind your mind's eye, how you imagine, how you visualise something. But colour magic is a really great way of finding your personal strength within a particular element and expanding that to the other elements. So you could do coloured waters if you wanted. If you really connected to the element of water and you were having a hard time with other things, you could put things in little vials of water and colour them, and there you go. And if you wanted to, I don't know. I mean, fire is the easiest one for me, because that's how I connect, and coloured candles is the easiest way of doing that. You could colour feathers for air. You have a different type of bird feather for each element, or you could get some faux coloured feathers for that sort of thing. Earth, you could do coloured salt. So there you go. So that's how I would personally use if you really had trouble either collecting an item to each element, or if you really connected on a really deep level with one idea, like one type of magic, such as candles, and you wanted to shift that into connecting with the 4 elements. This is a way in which you could do that. So, then we're going to talk a little bit about how I best connect to the elements. So these are things that you don't tend to see in the beginning when you start reading around connecting to the elements, and how I suggest doing these things. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is actually plants, and I've got cards for the plants rather than physical representations of plants, just for ease at the minute. Right, and again it's the 4 elements. I know spirit is not so much included here, but there you go. So we'll start with air. Oh goodness, okay. The light. Anyway, this is agrimony. So agrimony is a plant which you can get hold of quite readily, a herb you can get close to quite easily. Most metaphysical places will stock agrimony, and it's not an expensive one. I don't know about growing it. I don't think I've ever seen it growing locally here, so I can't really tell you about growing it locally here. But I personally think the plant/tree kingdom, as well as the animal kingdom, is perhaps one of the easiest ways to connect with and represent the 4 elements. By the way, I meant to say this and I forgot. So if you really connect to the energy of animals, like from the tarot, then visualizing an animal for each of the 4 elements and trying to commune with a spirit animal for each of the 4 elements might work really well for you. However, if you think plants might be a better way of going about it, this is something you can get hold of quite easily. So you can get a hold of agrimony quite easily, and you can hold it and you can connect with the energies of a plant that way. I think plant spirits have a very unique perspective, and connecting with plant spirits can be incredibly rewarding. And it really does tie into that idea of the natural world around us, particularly if you can find particular plants and things which are growing in nature, and you can go and you can commune with them and sort of sit with them and feel their energy and visualize how they would look to you if they were more corporeal form outside of a plant form. So basically the deva, or the energy of the plant in a more corporeal form outside of its plant form. So it's basically giving it a humanized form for the ease of humans connecting to energies. And if you can do that, I think it's a really great way of connecting to each of the 4 elements, because it's more natural and it really does give you a basis in the natural world of connecting to the 4 elements. So that's air for the plant. Water, another one that's really easy to get hold of, is chamomile. You can get hold of it in forms of tea, if nothing else. For earth we have vervain, which is one of the most readily available metaphysical plants. And then for fire, I've chosen mandrake. So then what I did is had a think about which trees. And oddly enough, earth trees are a pain in the bum to find. So cypress is the earth tree given in this particular set of cards. And for fire we have oak or hawthorn. Both are amazing, so I couldn't choose between them. Hawthorn's one of my favourites, so there you go. Hazel for air, and then silver birch or yew for water. Again, I couldn't choose between them. So let's have yew and goodness. Will that work? Come on. No. Fine, alright, whatever. So in the energy of trees is another good one that you can go out into nature a lot more easily perhaps than even plants. So for me, the way of walking the Celtic path is of course tied so intricately to the language of trees. And I have many videos about the different ogum and how I connect to them and how I see different crystals within them and different herbs within the energies. Determined. Haha, right. And trees and things are something that everybody should be able to find. And you can go out and you can commune with trees without people really watching you. I mean, you can go just take notes about them. You can place your hands on trees as long as you're respectful, and you connect to the energies of the particular tree. And again, you're doing that visualization, meditation process. And for me, trees really are the guardians of this earth, and that there is no better way to connect to each of the 4 elements than via trees. For me, they expand across all elements. They're deeply rooted in the earth. Their branches stretch out into the air. They are one of the major components of fire, firewood. They pull water up through the earth into their bodies, as well as being the first to touch rainwater when it falls. And they incorporate something beyond that for me. This is why they are part of the circle casting for me. They are creatures of spirit. They are beyond what we give them credit for. Human beings are obsessed with trees, and they always have been, and a lot of that people can't really explain. It's just a feeling, it just is. I just like drawing trees. I like art of trees. Trees, and they're life givers. They keep the us, and they keep the world, the planet alive. And for me, there is no greater way of connecting to the elements than trees. Getting to know the ogum, getting to know the trees. Again, it's a personal responsibility to build and form relationships with the energies of particular trees. The trees I've given you as each element are sort of, your correspondences. And there are problems with correspondences, of course, that somewhere along the line someone decided that was what that was, and is it right? And that is something that you need to think about within your own practice and see how you get on. I would go with the correspondences to begin with, and perhaps move along as you go forward. So finally, I'm going to give you a crystal for each element because I'm nice like that. Right. So for the element of earth, I would always choose tree or moss agate. The moss agate has the more blue, more sort of blues within them, and then the tree is just white and green. A lot of crystals actually are quite earthy, and they tend to be the green ones. For some reason, I have a lot more trouble connecting with earth crystals than any other. Don't know why, but tree and moss agate, they work, and they're really quite strong, and they're very earthy. And again, tumblestones are something that are easy and small to get hold of. For fire, I have a fire agate. You can also go with an obsidian, or most of the blacker crystals tend to be fire, but not all of them. But I really would suggest fire agate for a number of reasons. It's one that I keep meaning to work with a bit more closely. It was recommended to me by a friend, and it really does cleanse negativity out as well. It's really strong like that. For air, I would personally go with kyanite. In the Book of Stones it's given as storm energies, but for me kyanite has always had the element of air behind it. It's connected with the throat chakra, and therefore speaking, the verbalization, and verbalization has been one of the ways in which I have managed to form connections to air. and overcome my initial hesitation with connecting to the element of air by realising that being quite a verbal witch is an air thing. So for me, that's the one I would choose. And then water, kunzite, which is all about the heart chakra and it, you know, sort of universal love as well as self-love. There are many, many other crystals that people will associate with the 4 elements. Oh, and one for spirit, I'm going to say spirit quartz. Or labradorite for me, but that's a whole other video. So, these are just some of the many, many ways that there are out there to connect to the 4 elements. And I've tried to show you a variant of ways in which you can do this, not to confuse you, but to give you options. And the reason I really want to give you options is because of the overall sentiment of this video, which is there is no one way to connect to the 4 elements. There is simply discovering what the best way is for you and trusting that. So that's it for this video. Many blessings.